Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I'm joined by my co-host Greg Zumach. Dude, happy New Year! How you feeling? How's it going over there?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for all the baseball transactions that are going to happen in the new year because something has to. I'm excited for a really fun year of baseball, covering minors, covering draft, high school, college stuff, and obviously, hopefully, the Cubs. So, let's get to it. 2024.
Yeah, New Year, and honestly, like we're recording this on New Year's Day,
Mm-hmm.
and this episode drops on the second. This offseason we've been kind of recording episodes in advance a little bit and then posting them. So this year we're like everything is fresh, everything is happening right now, which is good because we're going to talk about some breaking news more or less, like some news as of today. This episode is going to be pretty filled up for the most part. Like we have a lot of topics to cover. That's what happens when you post episodes every 2 weeks in the offseason. We've got off the top, we're going to talk a little bit about the hiring of a new farm director and promotion of a new guy kind of in charge of the pitching development. And then I'm going to give you the floor at some point here and give you the floor as to some PCA content because I know there's been a lot of chatter about Pete Crow Armstrong's year in 2023. So we'll dig into that a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the Spring Breakout, the new kind of initiative created by MLB. That's a really fun thing. So we'll dig into that a little bit. And then we haven't had the chance to talk about our prospect list. So I know I did like a live recording over at Northsidebound YouTube page for people to kind of submit questions about my top prospect list. But as far as like talking about our list that we put together at Northsidebound, like we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. So we can talk a little bit about like the discrepancies between my rankings and your rankings and see how that goes. So you want to dig right into the news about the farm director?
Sure. So this is kind of an exciting one, but Jason Kanzler was just named or reportedly named the new farm director for the Chicago Cubs. If you're wondering who he's replacing, that's Jared Banner. He was promoted. I would say he's promoted. He moved from one role into an assistant GM type of role, which is a broader skill set. AGMs, assistant general managers, do kind of a lot. They could basically do anything, and so depending on different roles. But Jason Kanzler was brought over from Houston. I reached out to some people that I knew that knew Jason, and basically everything I've heard is super positive. This guy can do everything. He's super energetic, also very like forward thinking, and is extremely into like the data and how to incorporate that. And if you know anything about Houston, they're up there as an organization with like the Dodgers, with the Rays, as organizations that are extremely forward thinking, that are very, very good at incorporating, the data and analytics and actually bringing it to the players and making it work, right? Because there's a difference between a bunch of nerds, and I say that as one, a bunch of nerds sitting in the front office, like typing stuff out and making these things work on an app, and actually getting a player to tangibly work on it. That's the thing with like Craig Breslow was so good at. Guy was super smart, but he was able to work along with his department to actually help a player incorporate it. Jason Kanzler comes from more of a hitting background, but basically everybody seems to have a tremendous amount of respect for him. He was viewed as a really, really good get by the Chicago Cubs. So, I haven't met him personally, obviously, but I would have to say that's a very encouraging hire, which there's not a lot going on for the Chicago Cubs right now this offseason, but it seems like the people that they've hired this offseason have been really, really strong hires.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that in looking at the Chancellor hire, it checks multiple boxes that I wanted to see checked. One is he has a hitting focus because even with the loss of Craig Breslow, I have confidence in what the Cubs pitching development has kind of built. We'll get into that a little bit here in a minute. But he has that hitting side of things taken care of. Two is that he is a voice from the outside. He's an outside hire, which I thought was super, super, super important. Getting a different perspective in the organization, especially at this high level of farm director, I just think is super critical to making sure that the organization continues to run with the right mindset, I guess is the best way for me to put it. Like you're not just, you don't just have the same people in your front office, the same people in your development staff, and you're just bouncing ideas off of each other in a chamber all the time. Like you're getting outside ideas, outside thoughts. I love that part of it. And a fresh set of eyes on players too. In addition to like bringing outside ideas that obviously the Houston Astros are incredibly intelligent at this, like you pointed out. But also like just getting a different set of eyes on some players that we have, right? Like I think that getting Jason Kanzler's eyes on some players that maybe the current development staff or front office might have thought like we can't get much more out of these guys. Like maybe that was the case. Well, let's get a different set of eyes and see if they maybe do think that we can get more out of these players. So that was kind of the second check mark I saw from him. And then the third, I think, is just that I think it's really good to I've heard that that energy is there, and getting that more energy into the organization is always a really, really good thing. So yeah, I love this Jason Kanzler hire. I think that that's really important to this organization. And obviously that role of farm director was going to be filled. But it's really interesting to me how the Cubs are going about filling these roles when Breslow leaves and then Banner gets promoted, and like how you don't have to have like assistant GM in charge of X, assistant GM in charge of Y, farm director. Like you don't have to have very distinct roles. Those roles can kind of change a little bit. So I really like this hire of Kanzler overall.
And just one side note, and I'm always looking at things from like the draft perspective, but I am curious how this impacts the modeling that the Cubs will do to identify like what specific type hitters, I'm generally saying, but what specific type of hitters they will target. And last year we saw kind of a deviation of the type of hitters that they looked at. They primarily focused on guys who barrel the ball at a high rate. So players like Shaw, Long, Calmer, I mean, those are a few of the big guys from the college perspective. And even though there was a bit of chase with some of them, they still barreled the ball. And so I'm curious like how this might match up, especially when like the Astros took somebody that barrels the ball a lot, and Bryce Matthews, he was one of their kind of big picks there. So yeah, I'm just curious. I think it's really interesting, and I'll have to dive in. Like you said, this is relatively breaking news just a couple hours ago, but overall encouraging hire. And yeah, I guess we'll just see kind of the impact long term.
I'll throw in one last like fourth box that was checked, and you kind of hinted at it a little bit, is that he has a very diverse resume, right? Jason Kanzler was a minor league baseball player in the Twins organization. After retiring from his playing days, he actually became a teacher for a little bit, but down in Texas. But he was a coach on the Cape Cod League. He has a sports performance facility of his own that he founded and all that good stuff. So I think having those different kind of diverse resumes is really, really important. And he brings the side where he has played baseball. He knows how to communicate with these guys, but also the nerdy side, which is really important too in today's game. So that diverse resume is super important. But transitioning to the other kind of front office developmental hire, Dan Otero was actually promoted to run the pitching development side of things, which basically from that perspective, not as high ranking as what Breslow was, but from that perspective of like he's running pitching now. That's where that promotion for Otero comes in. And like as much as I liked Kanzler coming in from the outside, I really liked that Dan Otero was a guy that Craig Breslow tapped and kind of handpicked to come on board with him. So that's really exciting from Otero's perspective.
I think so too. I mean, it's cold, and we're probably going to have generally like rosy color views on some of these hires anyway, right? Like it'd be pretty surprising. But in full transparency, I think that if we were to look at the organization and say, if you want a hitting side and a pitching side guy, I shouldn't say just person, apologies. But if you want somebody from the outside and somebody from the inside, from the hitting side, this is no knock on the people who are hitting instructors, but I do want an outside influence there. And to come from an organization like Houston, that's a good one. From the pitching side, I do like the changes that have been made. That doesn't mean that the Cubs are an elite pitching organization yet. There's a really good article from Baseball America that says they're probably not, right about a top 10, 11, 12 type of an organization. That's good, especially if you can think about the progress that we've made, this is steady improvements. I like the stuff that they're doing inside. And Ryan Otero seems like a stud. Like you mentioned, Craig Breslow handpicked him to be his, chief lieutenant effectively. And there are other really strong pitching voices within the organization. He has experience working with them. So yeah, we're naturally probably going to err on the side of optimistic here, just because that's kind of what we do, and it's fun, and they're going to probably hire some good people. But honestly, I do like how both deals lined up.
Also want to point out that I repeatedly said Dan Otero. Well, it is Ryan Otero they promoted. Dan Otero is a former reliever in the major leagues who is also part of baseball ops for the Cleveland Guardians organization. So not Dan, it is Ryan Otero. My apologies.
That's okay. But Dan, if you're watching, you did not get poached.
Yeah.
Still, as far as we know, still have a job with Cleveland. But let us know if that changes. Fan of the podcast, Dan Otero.
Big fan of the podcast, Dan Otero. So that was kind of the news stuff that was fun to always kind of get into. But when I reach out to make sure that you were good for this episode, you ask specifically, can we talk about PCA? Because I know there's been a lot of chatter. What are your thoughts on everything going on this offseason about PCA?
So I think there's been a lot of discussion about PCA for a number of reasons. We got an up-close look at Pete Crow Armstrong last year, and I feel like in the 19 plate appearances and 14, at bats or something like that, I think the conversation could so easily have gotten carried away regardless, right? Like he could have hit 300, 400, 550 in those 14 at bats, and people would be like, he's Corbin Carroll on his best day, right? Like it's so easy to do that with the small sample size. I had somebody, I won't mention who, because they're behind they're a private account on Twitter, but we interact, and I think you interact with them as well, that they asked the question of, how do we view this? Do we just view Pete Crow Armstrong's poor showing in the majors and wash it away because small sample size? But had he been really good, say, look at this is portending, incredible results. And I think that that's a really valid point, that we tend to look at negative outcomes and chalk it up to small sample size far easier than positive outcomes, right? So I think that is a completely valid point. I will say that my personal view on Pete Crow Armstrong, had he been amazing or had he struggled, is the same line, and this is the line that I used: let's not get carried away. Let's not get carried away on the negative side. Let's not get carried away on the positive side, because there's so few. So here's where I stand on PCA. There's a few arguments out there, a few discussion points, that maybe he isn't this future stud that we are thinking about, or that had been thinking about. And I understand that there's some pessimism there. Here's again where I stand with him. There's a few things that can all happen simultaneously. One, Pete Crow Armstrong has a really, really strong floor. The defense is something that, yes, it's very easy to say that it showcases, that might artificially raise his rankings. I understand where that point's coming from, but in a way that it really establishes it. The threshold for a major league center fielder is very, very low from an offensive standpoint. There were only, I believe, 9 center fielders in Major League Baseball who even had average or better WRC plus last year. They all ended up being about 2 to 3 wins at least in wins above replacement. The value of a Major League center fielder is just extremely high. That being said, Pete Crow Armstrong also still has some things to work on, and that is completely true. And he may not be even an above or average or better offensive player for several years.
That's okay.
That is completely okay.
Yeah.
Now, that's not obviously what we want, right? Like, we want him to come out and have a WRC plus of 110 and go from there, right? But that is completely fine, because there is still significant value in that. The areas that PCA specifically struggles with is at the top of the zone. And those are very real concerns, right? Like, we've watched Patrick Wisdom for several years. Generally, if he gets a high fastball that's going to be a strike at the top of the zone or even not, there's a really good chance he's going to swing and miss. If nothing else, he just struggles to catch up with it. A hole at the top of the zone is very challenging in Major League Baseball right now when pitchers are taught to throw high efficiency fastballs at the top of the zone. They have that like riding action. It makes it very, very challenging. This is nothing new. This has been going around in Major League Baseball for the past few years. The Astros in particular are an organization that worked very hard to showcase that, and they beat a lot of hitters. So that's not nothing. Where I tend to line up as a little bit more optimistic on PCA is a few different things. One, that defense that we talked about, it matters a tremendous amount. He's going to provide value to an organization regardless of, as long as he isn't a complete black hole on offense. And I think he's shown enough that he should be okay, even if it's slightly below average offense to start. Two, the area that he specifically needs to work on is actually two areas. This is the hole at the top of the zone, which we just talked about, and I'll get to in a second. And two, reducing chase in his game. And I think both of those are really, really big factors there. But the hole at the top of the zone is something that Cubs hitting coach Dustin Kelly has actually been very successful at working with hitters to manage the top of the zone. So I already feel pretty good about that. And it's been reported that PCA has been working with him this offseason. So I already love that. And two, the Cubs have actually shown the ability to address chase, reducing chase rates for hitters, especially some of their key prospects. And so like James Triantos came into the organization with very significant amounts of chase. He had it all throughout high school, and they worked to address that. Matt Shaw is a hitter that they brought into the organization with slightly above average chase rates in college. And, they're kind of taking steps to remedy that. So ultimately, the last thing is that Craig Counsell is a really, really good influence on this organization. He knows how to match up hitters to put them in a really good spot. And he's also had multiple young outfielders that he's debuted and put them in really, really good positions to develop. And so ultimately, I'm sitting here kind of at the same place that I feel like with PCA I had in September. I really wish he would have gotten a hit just to kind of get that monkey off his bat. I don't know that he's going to break camp with the Cubs. A lot of it probably depends on who else they bring in, like Cody Bellinger or whatnot. But I kind of still feel pretty optimistic about him. The last thing I'll say is that we do want to make sure that we don't get carried away with the overall projections. Yeah. I've heard Corbin Carroll get thrown out there, and they're actually very different hitters and very different profiles. Like Corbin Carroll is just a beast, but he's probably more of like a left fielder, and PCA is just a very different thing. If you want like the most optimistic viewpoint, probably Michael Harris II is probably a better comp. But this is no knock. I love Jake, who is one of the ones who tossed out some of the conversations on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it, but kind of threw out more of an upside comp, but I would argue more of a realistic 50th percentile comp, 40th to 50th percentile, which is Jackie Bradley Jr. Jackie Bradley Jr., I think if I understand that we might look at that as maybe a negative, Jackie Bradley Jr. put up like 16.8 WAR over his arbitration times. That's an excellent outcome. That would be enormously helpful for this team. He had a season that he had like over 5.5 wins. That's awesome. Yeah. So I realize that maybe that's not super exciting, but hey, that's my spiel on PCA. Well, I totally get it, but I'm still pretty optimistic.
Yeah, I think the big thing. So I actually just released a prospect profile on PCA over on the Northside Bound YouTube page. It's about I think 12-minute video or so, kind of going through his strengths, weaknesses, his potential outcomes, stuff like that. So go check that out if you have the time. But I think this is a good time to kind of have this conversation. I'm glad you kind of laid everything out there because I think that the lack of activity from the Chicago Cubs this offseason has led to this conversation becoming more than just a prospect nerds are having this conversation, right? I think this is a conversation that you and I would probably be having regardless of what was going on this offseason, but it is now one of the main talking points of the offseason for the Cubs, for Cubs fans everywhere. And that's wild to me. And that should not be the case. I think that for me, where it started to become a little crazy is just all of the names that have been thrown out as comps. Like and throwing out names as comps are, I'm fine with it if it's like a play style or if it's but they're being used as like full blown. This is 90th percentile version of PCA. This is 80th. This is 70th. This is 60th. This is like down the line. It's like we can't get that detail with them. I've heard Jackie Radley. I've heard Corbin Carroll. I have heard Michael Taylor. I've heard Kevin Kiermaier. I've heard Albert Almora. I've heard everything. I've heard so many different players, and it's like, he's PCA, man. I like what you pointed out at the very beginning, where the defense establishes the player he is, the floor of the player that he is. It doesn't we shouldn't point to that and be like, that's all he can become. Like that's an option for all he can become. It establishes it. And I think that something that needs to be pointed out too with PCA is that this is not a defense first guy that like makes a lot of contact and like maybe the power comes around one day, right? That's not who he is. It's like, let's point out the fact that over the past couple of years, he's established that he has power. When he was acquired by the Cubs from the Mets, it was defense, speed, contact. And that's why I think that like the Almora comps were thrown around at him very early on. But he has proven that he is a far better and faster base runner, far faster. He is a much better defender in center field. And he has power. he has legitimate power, and that is what raises his ceiling, right? The defense has the floor established. The power and pop that he can produce at the plate makes him a higher ceiling type of player. And that's what's most impressive to me about PCA. To me, I'm at the point where it's like, we got to stop with the comps a little bit. We got to stop with like over analyzing. Like we have said this on the pod. Like for you guys out there listening, you're probably sick and tired of hearing this, but it's like we've kind of said over and over again, like nothing that happened with PCA at the major league level should change your mind about him one way or the other. Whether you think more positively for some reason or more negatively, like you shouldn't, because it doesn't matter, right? The problems that we saw from PCA at the plate were there in AAA, they were there in AA. It's the high fastball and particularly and the chase, but particularly the chase on changeups like down and away. It's that pitch. For me, if he can take care of one of those things, if he can just stop swinging at high fastballs, not even like start making contact with them. I hope he can start making contact with them, right? But if he just stops swinging at them, then some of those will be taken as balls. Some of them will be taken as strikes, and that's fine too, right? Like, just stop swinging at high fastballs, and then right there, he's already a better offensive player entirely. And then if he starts making contact with some of those, then even better. If he does that and can make some contact with the changeup out of the zone, that's the greatest, right? I know that Brad posted over on Twitter a couple days ago, or maybe it was today. PCA's numbers in AA post tacky baseball, and they were absolutely outrageous. Like 345 batting average, like OPS, I think above 1,000, like just crazy numbers from PCA post tacky baseball. And again, that's not what PCA is going to do at the major league level. He's not going to bat 345, but I know he's not going to bat 0. So give me a batting average somewhere between 0 and 345. That's PCA.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair viewpoint. The total inactivity this offseason, I think, has magnified a few of the players that we all watched down the stretch. Mm-hmm. And so, it's kind of let the conversation just spin out of control on some of these guys, right? This is an organization, a fan base that has been haunted by Albert Almora for far too long. They're like the most two opposite players.
PCA is Albert Almora. Nico was Albert Almora. It's Albert Almora. With all due, I loved Albert Almora, the person, when he was in the Cubs. What he did playing even a minute role. Well, I mean, it was bigger than that role in the World Series championship. Obviously, is terrific. Like I didn't mind Albert Almora for like the role he ended up playing on the Chicago Cubs. I didn't mind that. But what he has done in terms of like just like messing with our minds and like, oh, is every Cubs prospect going to be like this? Albert Almora like again, Brad posted another graphic, right, where it was comparing PCA to some other players, what they did in AA. One of those players was Albert Almora, who posted an OPS below 700 at AA at an older age than PCA.
Yeah.
And it's like PCA posted a OPS above 850 there. So
right.
It's just like, not only do I feel confident that PCA is better than what I'm 100% confident that PCA is different than Albert Almora.
Yep.
I am very, very confident that PCA is better than Almora at the major league level. I am also 100% confident that he has been significantly better than Almora was at the minor league level, you know? So it's like, it's different, dude. It's different.
Yeah. It's like, I think things get so easily adjusted. We always look for patterns and attributing like, whoa, I saw this player, so it's got to be kind of like that guy. It just, folks, like PCA is PCA. If you want to pick a player to comp him to, by all means, fan however you want. Please don't pick Albert Almora, or at least don't put it in my mentions. They're just very different players. And so different people too, like just different like styles of individual. So yeah, let's see where he's sitting. I think that the range on, and I'll end this by saying this is a prospect podcast. And so obviously we're going to talk about prospects in as accurately as we can, but obviously some prospects don't work out, even the top ones. It is possible that things don't work out. I would be very surprised just with how we lined everything up. But like, yes, we have to acknowledge that things don't work out. That being said, I think we just need to kind of slow our roll, regardless of however you feel on PCA. Let's just kind of watch him this spring, this summer, because this year is going to be, I think, a big year for him now that he's had a taste, a cup of coffee, if you will, in Chicago.
I'll just remind everybody, like I try to do with every single prospect, is that we can't set our expectations too high as they enter the major leagues, both for short-term and long-term. We can't expect PCA to be a WRC plus above 100 his first year. We can't expect, we shouldn't be disappointed if he's not a perennial all-star later on in his career. We can't be disappointed by those things. He can still be successful. He can still be important to the Chicago Cubs, and we just can't get too wrapped up in potential negative outcomes. But that segment was presented to you by Toxic Social Media. The next thing is more fun to talk about, right? So let's talk about this.
So sorry, really quick. So yeah, Toxic Social Media. I would want to be very clear. This is not calling out Jake, who I absolutely love.
No,
he was great. And I didn't think you meant that, but I didn't want anybody to love Jake. I think he raised some really good points. It's been a boring off season. So thank you, Jake, for bringing this up, because you, along with the many people, it was a really good topic.
And I'll say that Jake's conversation on it was far more rooted in here's how I can back it up, or it made more sense. So yeah,
it was far more justified. But yeah.
Anyway, and I agree with it a little bit more. But
yeah,
all right, let's get into something a little bit more fun to talk about, and that is that MLB announced what was this, a couple of weeks ago now, that they are introducing a new kind of initiative called Spring Breakout, which is basically what they're doing is every organization, every team is going to face off. Two teams are going to face off twice, but every team is going to face off in one game against another team with their top prospects, more or less, right? It's the equivalent of the futures game, but just for each individual organization. So the Chicago Cubs are facing off in spring training on March 15th against the Chicago White Sox at Sloan Park. And what will happen is each team, both the Cubs and White Sox and every other team in their respective games, will put together a roster of 20 to 25 players, of 20 to 25 prospects, I should specify, of their choosing, to kind of face off in a game. And I think that the best way I can describe this is these games are pretty much already happening across the league every single year, multiple times in spring training. This is putting it on TV, and this is shedding more light on it, right? This is it's more advertised. It's better broadcast. It's stuff like that, as opposed to just like these games happening in the backfields. So I thought it would be kind of fun here to kind of go through a potential lineup, a potential roster maybe that the Cubs can put together for this game against the White Sox in the spring breakout game. Because I think that like the initial way to look at it is to just run through the top prospects and say, let's just add the prospects ranked number 1 through 25. Obviously, that won't work. Remember, this is 1 7-inning game is how it's going to work. Probably the players, you might get 2 innings out of the starting pitcher, maybe. More than likely, it's just every pitcher kind of gets 1 inning of work, maybe even a little bit less. It's a spring training game for minor leaguers. There's not a whole lot of pitches being thrown there. But also you got to match up the positions, right? So like if you don't have a third baseman, let's go further down the prospect ranking and stuff like that. So I figured it'd be fun to kind of put together a roster here, run through. My assumption here, we don't know how the Cubs are going to approach putting together a roster. Honestly, they could turn around and put together a roster of guys ranked like 50 through 100. Like they might use 0 top prospects. Now, I think the MLB would probably be a little bit pissed if they did that because they're putting together this game for a reason. But the Cubs technically probably could do that. Also, I'm kind of going with the assumption that the Cubs are going to not use any guys that have already made their major league debut. I don't think they're actually barred from playing in this game, right?
I don't think so. And I will say, because that was going to segue, we don't need to get too much into it, but yeah, when I was looking at this, one of the first questions I had is I wonder if Jordan Wicks would pitch. And I'm leaning towards no. Yeah. I'm guessing no in this scenario.
Yeah, I figured that just if you're on the 40-man roster or will be in big league camp, that's right. Not necessarily a negative against you. But if you're PCA, if you're Jordan Wicks, if you're Alexander Canario,
right?
If you made the big league roster already, I'm kind of canceling you from this game. On the other side, I think that let's start off with the outfield, which is always a fun position. Kevin Alcantara already on the 40-man roster. I could see Kevin Alcantara playing in this game for sure, and I think that he kind of headlines the lineup.
I hope so, man. I hope they slap his picture on the logo. That guy is pure energy, excitement, and yeah, I hope the Jaguar, pounces. I think that he would be a fantastic individual to showcase this game.
I think that Kevin Alcantara, who's already on the 40-man roster, will likely be assigned to Double-A in the high minors, paired with the outfielder of Owen Casey, who will likely start the year in Triple-A, is my guess. Like those are 2 guys that I think are perfect for this game. Perfect, perfect to showcase like the proximity to the major leagues, both top 5 prospects in the organization, like that is exactly what you want to see in a game like this. Is Owen Casey and Kevin Alcantara kind of in center field and right field, and also batting third and fourth.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the way that they could do that. Yeah. That would be awesome.
Who's a third outfielder that you like to play in this game for the Cubs?
So that's where it gets really, really interesting. And I'm not sure I have like a great name for you, but the one that I've been kind of thinking about actually is Christian Franklin.
That's who I had. That's who I had
awesome.
as my third.
Right. Yeah, we're on the same page. I thought I might be going too deep there. But I just really love what Christian Franklin has done. I think that he's justified a lot of his workload and his development steps in the development list. And just, you know what, he would be a fantastic individual. You could slide him anywhere around the outfield that you want to. Christian Franklin would be my pick for the third outfielder, assuming PCA is not playing.
Yeah, it feels like he's earned the opportunity to kind of showcase himself on a bigger stage, and after what he did last year. So yeah, I like the outfield of Alcantara, Owen Casey, and Christian Franklin for sure. You want to just kind of go through the infield, starting with catcher? Who's your pick for catcher? I think this one seems more straightforward, right?
Yep, I'm going to go with Moises Ballesteros. I think that is the right call, unless the Cubs feel like they've shifted, like he's just not going to have the physicality or is too physicality or too much physicality for the position. I think as long as he's lining up a catcher next year, I line up Moises. And then clearly they believe in the bat.
And then if it's not Moises, it's probably Pablo Aliendo getting the start there at catcher. I guess. I'm guessing that they will absolutely be carrying at least 2 catchers on the roster for this team. So my guess is Ballesteros and Aliendo are your 2 picks for this game.
Yeah, as provided they don't go with 3 catchers or something like that. I think if I was lining it up, those would be the 2 guys I would pick.
Yeah. at first base, so I guess we're assuming Matt Mervis is not going to be a part of this game, considering he has made his major league debut, all that good stuff. I think Hayden McGeary is kind of the obvious choice at first base.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, the only one that I could maybe understand is actually Moises Ballesteros lining up a little bit at first base, with McGeary kind of being more of the DH type perspective. That would be a way to kind of get some different showcase type of guys in there. But yeah, McGeary, if you're looking at first baseman in the organization and you don't want to consider Mervis for whatever reason, the two guys that I would look at is McGeary and actually BJ Murray Jr.
Yeah.
I think that would be another option that if you told me that BJ Murray was the first baseman in this type of game, I could buy that as well.
I was going to say, I've got BJ Murray lined up at DH. So, I mean, you put him at DH, put him at first base, swap McGeary, whatever you want to say. I've got both those guys in. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know how you feel about it, but at second, third, and short, it feels very much so like you've got 3 top 10 prospects there facing off against the White Sox in this game, right?
I think you could, yeah. I'm curious, who do you have lining up at third base, though?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So I got Triantos at second base.
Yep,
I'm gonna put him there.
I'm with you there. Yep.
And then you got Jefferson Rojas and Matt Shaw. I think that I'd put Jefferson Rojas at short and put Matt Shaw at third. I think that the excitement that could kind of conjure up should be really exciting. Just to see for Cubs fans to watch on TV this minor league spring training game, that's this spring breakout performance, and to see Matt Shaw playing third base would be just like electric. Like the what you're seeing on social media there would be wild and like, oh, like it's happening now. And I just think that like long term, like that's where you hope these two guys land is Rojas at short, Matt Shaw at third. And so like that's where I'd go. If you want Matt Shaw at short, I'd actually put to be determined what we see from James Triantos and where they play him defensively next year. I think that's probably a contributing factor too, right?
Right.
If they enter 2024 as, oh, James Triantos is a third baseman again, then maybe Triantos at third, you got Rojas at second, and you got Shaw at short. If you enter 2024 and James Triantos is now a left or center fielder all of a sudden, then all right, then maybe Christian Franklin's out or whatever. But that's actually a pretty big part of this is what position do the Cubs believe James Triantos is entering 2024? Because in 2022, he was a third baseman, pretty much only a third baseman.
Only a third baseman.
In 2023, he was pretty much only a second baseman. And he dabbled a little bit in center. He dabbled a tiny bit at third base. He was pretty much a second baseman only. So it's like, what is he in 2024? I don't know. But tentatively, I'll run Triantos at second, Shaw at third, Rojas at short, and to be determined.
I'll throw a wrinkle out there too for shortstop, because I will say that I think that Rojas would be incredibly fun. I wonder if they would throw Luis Vasquez out there at short instead, just because he's also, totally a guy that can hold his own at that high level. The defense is spectacular. I think him playing next to Matt Shaw would actually be really helpful. I'm really looking forward to maybe seeing that at some point in 2024. Can't believe I'm saying 2024 and it's like now. But like that would be another one that I think could be totally fair there, is Luis Vasquez. And then, I think as far as those options, maybe as your later inning guy or somebody to toss out, get a pinch hitting appearance or roll out there, I think Josh Rivera wouldn't surprise me as somebody who they kind of put out there for a bit. And again, it's a showcase game. So,
yeah, on my roster, I had as like bench options, I had Luis Vasquez, I had Josh Rivera, I had Pedro Ramirez, and I had Brennan Davis.
Nice.
So that kind of fills out the roster, but it also depends on how the Cubs want to approach it, how many defensive substitutions they want to go with, how many pitchers they want to carry on the roster. Transitioning to pitchers, if you can find a way to start Cade Horton in this game, man, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I have a feeling like Major League Baseball is going to do whatever it takes to kind of encourage that. Not that they're going to step in and say that needs to happen, but yeah, they really want a bad man on the mound, and obviously he's the baddest one in the organization. So the nice thing is though that in previous years, and I mean they haven't had a Cade Horton type pitcher in 20 years. So, that's obviously special. But in prior years, like, we'd be talking about Ben Brown, like in the same air, even though he's not the same caliber of arm. And so, like, Cade Horton, Ben Brown are both names that I would anticipate trying to get out there on the mound.
Yep, I had those two guys as well. I figure this is a little bit easier to kind of run down, like, whoever you have as the top ranked pitching prospects in the organization. This is more simple, right? As opposed to like finding positions for the other guys. I think that Jackson Ferris, although younger, it depends on how young they want to go with this roster, right? Obviously, Rojas would be the youngest as far as the position players go. Well, yeah, Rojas would. Ballesteros is actually pretty young too.
He is,
but lower levels, Jackson Ferris is a lower level guy. Do they want to go with more higher level type prospects? I don't know. It'd be fun to see Jackson Ferris throw in this game. That would be pretty electric. Same with Drew Gray. I think that'd be fun to have him on this roster. But I think those are my guys of kind of like lower level type pitchers that I anticipate seeing on this roster.
I would add Michael Arias to that.
And Michael Arias, yep.
Yeah, I think because he's the kind of guy that you could just throw out there for an inning. And exactly. It kind of fits really, really well with that.
Yep. And then up the ladder, I think Cole Franklin would be a good pick to have on this roster. I think Brody McCullough would. And then I think Brandon Birdsell would as well, as kind of some other starters that will probably only go one inning for this game.
Yeah. And on specific like attributes, I would say McCullough would be a great one. I think that he is possibly still returning from that leg thing. So I don't know if they would throw him out there now, but yes, like if we were drawing this up, absolutely he'd be exactly who I would put out.
Yeah. What about relievers that might be on this roster that, like, they're not always, I mean, they're not the top ranked guys in the organization just because they're relievers only, but I think that like they play well, like they play awesome in a game like this.
They do. I mean, we've been talking about Zach Lee for a couple years, and I think that like that would be a guy that would make a lot of sense to toss out there. He's a later inning individual and certainly has the chops to kind of handle it. He's a little bit on the older side. I think he's going to be like 26 here pretty soon. Maybe I'm off on that, but that would be somebody that I would kind of look at there. Eduardo Nunez has thrown some really, really big velocity this past offseason. Like that would be kind of a guy that I could see. People in the organization love Frankie Scalzo. So, I mean, maybe just on moxie alone, and obviously he's got some stuff, but on moxie alone, I think that he would be a really good one to kind of toss out there. I mean, those are kind of the names off the top of my head there. Oh, didn't Chase Watkins have some really, really good stuff this winter? They just posted some video. If he's actually throwing mid-90s up like 96,
he'd be velocity, my sleeper pick here. Yeah,
that would be a really, really fun one to see.
Yeah, I'll throw just two more names out there. Both guys that are on the 40-man roster: Bailey Horn, Porter Hodge.
Great call. Yep.
Yeah, I think that actually. So side note on all this, I was going through and looking at pitch totals for a lot of the organization from this past year. I was tweeting some of that out, posting it on Threads as well. I was really, I was kind of caught off guard that Porter Hodge had, I think it was 3 outings this year where he threw more than 80 pitches in a game. And like you forget that he was literally just converted to the bullpen. Like it happened like a couple months ago, season, like baseball season wise, So I don't know. I think that would be a really good time for Porter Hodge to just show his stuff. It would remind me of something, the different, obviously, but the kid from Milwaukee that threw in the Futures game that just kind of hopped on the radar out of nowhere because he was throwing 102 miles an hour with 91 mile an hour sliders. Mizorowski.
Mizorowski, yeah.
Mizorowski. That vibe I could see happening with Porter Hodge in this spring breakout game. Obviously, Porter Hodge is not going to become a top 50 prospect, but like just him throwing in this game and fans being like, what the hell is this stuff, dude? Like, this is crazy. I could see Porter Hodge doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally fair. Mizorowski, actually, Shadow Cub. He was the second round pick in 2022 of our Northside Bound Shadow Draft for the Cubs. So, big time arm there. If you wanted to break out, I mean, Porter Hodge is a really interesting dude. Actually, a little bit of a teaser there. We're going to have a little bit of a breakdown as a preview for 2024 with Porter Hodge. He's kind enough to sit down metaphorically. Maybe he's standing while he's responding to these. I don't know, but answering some questions for us. And so kind of talking a little bit about his 2023, talking about his 2024, what he's prepping for. I think he's a really interesting guy in the organization, and I'm looking forward to kind of diving into stuff with him.
I love it. Anything else you want to hit on with spring breakout?
Honestly, I'm very curious how the Cubs operationalize it. I think that there's, like we've talked about, tossing out all the prospects, but wouldn't surprise me to see them, I don't want to say get a little cute, but try something very, very specific. Like they want specific guys to be showcased in specific ways when they're having a lot of eyes on them, or challenging a specific player in a role, kind of like Rojas we were talking about. Like, there's nothing that you're going to lose by going out there and facing the best of the best. So we want you to just have that experience, even if you go 0-for-4 with 4Ks. And so, like, I not that they're going to get cute by any means, but I could see them trying very specific development opportunities with kind of this, hey, this is far more than just a glorified, like, breakout. This is kind of like a mini features game, like you were talking about.
Yeah, I'm excited for it, man. I'm really looking forward to what this game looks like come the spring. So, all right, let's talk prospect list, because we have not yet here. A few weeks ago, well, that have been mid-December, early December. We came out over at Northside Bound. I dropped a list. You dropped a list. Todd Johnson dropped a list. Rich Biesterfeld dropped a list. We combined all those and dropped our Northside Bound cumulative rankings. And then we also got some help from you guys, you the listeners out there, and put together a ranking, a fan created prospect ranking. So dropped all the lists all over the course of a week. And I put together a top 50. You had a top 40. Is that right?
Yeah, it was, I think 44, 45. Yeah. I got to like the last part of the tier, and then I even had people in the comments who were like, "Why not this guy?" Like, actually, that's a really good point.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a deep system.
So we're not going to just sit here and run through our top 44, top 50 guys. That makes for bad radio. So if you guys want to read through those, go check it out on Northside Bound website. We have a tab up on the top of the screen that you can just click directly on our lists and check those out. What we are doing today is I've got 6 guys here that we were most different. We had the biggest differences in our rankings of these players, which was actually, some of these are smaller than you'd think, because you and I were actually pretty similar on the rankings of a lot of our guys here. We did not talk before we ranked. I did not say, hey, I'm going to have X player here. Do you have them there? We didn't do that, but it ended up, they're pretty similar. So I'm just going to run down these 6 guys, and we can kind of talk about how we think of them, why one of us is higher, one of us is lower, and just kind of go from there. Is that cool?
That sounds fantastic, man.
All right, let's talk about Luke Little first. That's a guy we have seen at the major league level. I have him ranked as the number 15 prospect in the organization. You have him ranked lower at number 24. This is actually one of the bigger differences we have, 9 slots different. I'll kick it to you first on why do you have him lower? I guess I'll just put it out there. Why do you have him lower?
Yeah, so strictly because I just tend not to rank relievers very high. This isn't to knock on Luke Little. I've been super high on him, but just from like a value perspective, that tends to be how I do it. I believe Luke Little is the highest reliever that I have ranked. He is exceptional.
I'd argue that, though. We're gonna get into Michael Arias.
We'll get into Arias, but yeah, but I will justify that one. I do still technically have him as a starter, but yes, that's a very good point. So Luke Little is the highest reliever that I have ranked, and historically, if the past couple years, that's been right around the early 20s or late 20s. So just that's all.
I hear you 100% on that. It's hard for me to argue against that, because it's just like that seems pretty standard practice with the relievers. I have them up a little bit higher just because I think that as opposed to other relief prospects, which like I have other relief prospects. I have who do I have down in the 40s? I have Bailey Horn down in the 40s. Mm-hmm. I just left Zach Lee off my top 50, which was not smart, but I did it anyways. I have Frankie Scalzo in there at 40 or 47 or so. And so I have those guys there. It's just for me, the upside as a
Mhm.
reliever from Luke Little. It's like I just think I saw 15 from him. I think it makes sense. I think I have a lot of confidence in the fastball and the slider. For me, I even think he can be a multi-inning guy, like a not like 3 or 4 innings, but a 2 inning guy if you need him to. Um, I just feel so confident,
Mhm.
and clip this and share it later when I'm an idiot. But I just feel so confident in his ability to kind of like really stick longer term than you would associate most relievers to at the big league level. So that's where I've got him there. But again, like we're
Yeah.
nitpicking here, dude. Like 15 to
I
24 is not like that much of a difference at all. And really, like most of these guys are probably if you had me and you tier these guys out, which I have tiers on mine. I can't remember if you had tiers, but like if we tier these out, most of these guys are in the same tier.
I was gonna say, I'm trying to remember who I actually had at, like, the 15 range, but I feel like that is I did, like,
Yeah.
internal tiers in my
Yeah.
own kind of breakdown. It's very close.
Yeah.
I will say one really quick thing on Luke Little. I am so excited to see how Craig Counsell uses Luke Little because I
Oh
think
yeah.
it's gonna be absolutely nasty.
I do too, dude. I'm excited. I'm so excited for Luke Little next year. All right, so let's talk about Arias. We kind of hinted at Michael Arias. You have Michael Arias at 13.
Mhm.
I have him at 19. And I think
Yep.
that from my perspective, like my perspective on it, like I see almost like I am almost certain that reliever, it's not even reliever risk to me. It's like I'm viewing him in the light of a reliever. Like I'm
Yep.
viewing him at the same as Luke Little.
Yeah, and that's completely fine. The Cubs adding him to the 40-man roster
Mhm.
gives me a little bit more encouragement that they're gonna give him another year, as a
Yes,
starter.
I think so too. I think they will too.
And that's maybe where I'm hedging my bet a little bit. The other thing is that, friend of the pod, friend of the Discord, Matt Thompson, this isn't inside information. He's posted on the Discord, but he said that his, within the context of Prospects Live, which fantastic institution, by the way, you should read basically everything they have. They've heard feedback that teams have a 60, so like they have a plus grade on Michael Arias, and so maybe I let that kind of sway me a little bit, but that's a really really big encouraging thing to say, and I buy that. So I think him being on the 40 man, getting another chance to continue to be a starter, I think pushes that to the point where he would be listed like starting pitcher / reliever
Yeah, yeah.
in how I'd view it, but. Yeah, kind of nitpicking still. I think the arm is super fun.
I was gonna say because I the fastball. I love the fastball. I love the
Mm.
changeup. The arm is fast as hell. I love the way he throws. I love everything about Michael Arias. It's just like I can like all those things and still view him as a as a reliever.
Yeah.
You know what I
Oh,
mean? So
totally.
all right, let's go down to BJ Murray Jr. because I hate talking. I feel like I'm forced to talk down about BJ Murray in these kind of conversations. I've had these online with other people as well. I hate it because I love BJ Murray. And if you want to love BJ Murray even more, go check out our last episode interview with Cole Roeder. He had a lot of incredible things to say about BJ Murray Jr. I have him ranked at number 25. You have him ranked at 18. Again, kind of nitpicking here. What do you love most about BJ Murray? That kind of I think you had him higher than most of us at Northside Bound.
I do. When I would ask around on the organization, some of the players, even kind of like how you talked about with Cole Roeder,
Mm-hmm.
I would ask, like, hey, you're in a lineup with somebody, who do you want behind you?
Yeah.
Or things like, who do you trust up there in tight spots? And there were a lot of the same names got thrown out, like Owen Casey. Okay, Moises Ballesteros was another guy. BJ Murray was one that
Yeah.
consistently got tossed around. And I think that those like soft comments actually carry some weight, when we back up with like the eye test and back up with some of the data and stuff like that. And or at least numbers, because we don't necessarily have too much data on lower levels guys, double A and below. But it mattered to me. I think that BJ Murray fits the role of somebody where, like, if you had him in the Rays organization, they would love him because he
Mm-hmm.
is this, like, perfectly built, 1-to-1 K to walk, or closer to that ratio, like high walks, Ks are reasonable. Guys that probably isn't like a standout defender at second or third, but probably plays this, like, Brandon Lowe type, second base, first base, maybe you toss him at third type of a role, and just consistently produces. So yeah, again, actually that one would be the same tier, 18 and 24, 25 or whatever for me. So, not too much, but yeah, I'm a fan of the BJ Murray Jr.
Yeah, I think that his hit tool is really good. I think his plate discipline and vision is tremendous. I think that his defense is better than he gets credit for at third base. Not I wouldn't even say, like, I wouldn't even look at it and like call it, oh, like, that's good defense. It's just it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine defense at third base, which is a lot better than he was entering the year. So that's something to get hype about. Um, I just I think what I put in my write up of BJ Murray, and I've kind of continued to voice, is that as he makes it to AAA and as he makes it to the major leagues, which I have confidence that he will make it to the major leagues, I worry about him being challenged in the zone more. Um, he showed the ability to pull the ball in the air a little bit more as the season wore on in 2023, but he'll really need to improve the exit velos, improve that ability to pull the ball in the air so that he becomes more dangerous, because that walk rate will not stay up at 14-15% as he reaches AAA and the major league level, because pitchers will come into the zone with him more because they're not worried about him jumping a fastball or pouncing on a curveball in the zone. So the walk rates will go down, and if the power doesn't match it, then it's like you're looking at not as valuable hitter, and he's not getting value from the field as well. So it's like that's my biggest concern. What I like about him is that, like, the plate discipline and vision is already there, and that's the toughest thing to teach a baseball player. That's so tough. That's something that's God given to a certain degree. You know what I mean? Like, you can teach it a little bit, but like that's just a skill that some players have. It's like, I love that that's already there. I love that he knows how to work in at bat and all that good stuff. So that's going to be my thing that I'm watching. That's like a top 5 storyline I'm watching next year in terms of, like, can he do damage, do consistent damage to fastballs in the heart of the zone.
Yeah, and I mean, if he does, all of a sudden there's a guy who could be up by the end of 2024 and be your third baseman. Like, I mean, honestly, that's not out of the realm of possibility. He would need to make some significant strides there, but like that's actually something that some Cubs prospects have done. So, I would say it's a very worthy storyline.
Okay, the biggest discrepancy that we have is Zaire Hope. I have him at 13, which is super high. You have him at 28, which is actually, I think, higher. I think it's still even higher than what, like,
I thought
Todd
I was going to be high.
Yeah. So this is actually the biggest one. Me at 13, you at 28. I guess since I'm probably the more crazy one, I'll go first here. I think that the first thing I'll say, I was kind of voicing this to you a little bit before we started recording. The thing that is so important is that, like, these prospect rankings are fun. Like, these are supposed to be fun. We're supposed to enjoy these. I don't know how other people view their rankings of players, but like, I don't look back in 5 years and be like, what an idiot I was, or even look back and say, like, I nailed it. Like, I nailed this guy. Like, you guys didn't. Like, I don't really care. I don't care that much. Like, I think it's really important to give people an idea of what we're looking at in the Cubs farm system. I think that, like, people use these. I think these are read way more than like a prospect profile. Like, if I was to write a prospect profile of Zaire Hope, far less reads than what people are reading in a prospect rankings. And so, like, this is sometimes how people get their, like, content and learn more about the players, which is awesome and how it should be. But I think my ranking of Zaire Hope at 13, there's a very clear, in my eyes, delineation between the top guys in the Cubs farm system, and that goes to about 12. For me, I have Canario at 12, and then kind of the next group, and that starts with Matt Mervis at 14. I think is who I have there, right? And so that seemed like, if I'm going to get behind a guy, which I really believe in Zaire Hope's ability to hit for power, to have a lot of speed, to just impact the game with his overall athleticism. Like, my biggest concern with Zaire Hope is the swing and miss, and like, he's still in, like, complex league ball. So like, if there's a place to get behind him and put him in slot him in my top 50, it felt like that was the place to put him. And so I'm just really excited. Zaire, I talked about BJ Murray and what he does next year. That's a top 5 kind of storyline. Cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what we get from Zaire Hope next year in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, I'm actually just kind of scanning my reports right now because I think that he was outside of the drafted folks. He was the highest player that I had that didn't have more than like a handful of at bats at Myrtle Beach or above.
Okay, yeah.
So I tend not to actually rank complex guys very high. That goes back to even to when I was ranking Hernandez a little bit lower than folks, just because the jump. I just want to see it in Myrtle Beach. This is a guy that wouldn't surprise me to see struggle a little bit in Myrtle Beach because it's really hard to hit there. And then just look like a baller in South Bend because he's got that type of potential. We've gone this whole time talking about how much you believe in Zaire Hope, and we haven't made a hope pun, which is disappointing but also encouraging. So I think it's a bit of a mixed bag there. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm a big fan of Zaire Hope. I think he's an absolute dog out there, and I am really excited for him in 2024.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to be very careful about not dropping him down on my rankings based on results next year, right? Like, unless he comes out like, so I dropped Christian Hernandez pretty significantly in my rankings, not because he didn't produce result, like not because the stats weren't there. I just didn't like what I saw from him as much. That's why I dropped him. As long as I'm not like really like turned off by what I see physically and like the way he's performing out there for Zaire Hope in Myrtle Beach in 24, I don't really care about the numbers as much. And I'm not going to drop him down to 40 based on like some bad numbers, unless he plays the entire season and bats 125, like that's different. But I mean, but then at that point, he's probably doing something that I'm seeing that looks poor,
Right. It's probably not a numbers thing so much as just, you know it if you see it. Like you just look at a guy and you're like, man, it's just not, the development steps didn't take forward. Like might have taken a step back, progress isn't linear and all that. But, sometimes you see it, that there's significant steps that need to happen. But hey, I think Zaire Hope's going to be one of the most fun guys to watch in the system next year. I think that Myrtle Beach team is going to be very fun. So bring it on, man.
2 more guys. One we've already talked about quite a bit, so we'll be quick on him. Porter Hodge, I have him at 33. You have him at 20. And so that's a pretty big, I mean, the Hope one was a pretty big difference. Porter Hodge, 33 for me, 20 for you is a big difference. What are your thoughts on him? I guess first, like, what are your thoughts on him? Is he a reliever? Are you viewing him there at 20 with like a little starter hope still in there?
I'm viewing him a little bit more as a starter. I think that he would not have been added to the 40-man if the Cubs felt like he was a pure reliever. I don't think that the value would be there to hold down the spot. So I think without having talked to him, which we'll hopefully be doing here pretty soon, I think he's still coming in as a starter. And so for me, I'm viewing as the 40-man is a giant step of encouragement, a stamp of approval, so to speak, that he's making the development steps behind the scenes and did the steps that they wanted to see this year. And he is a guy who's on the younger side. He possesses an arsenal that needs some refinement, but also fits the archetype of the ones that the Cubs have done really well with. And so just that very low efficiency fastball, which for anybody who is hearing that and isn't familiar with the term, that's not a bad thing. That actually just means that the spin operates very differently than somebody who's throwing it with a lot of backspin. So it's just a different type of fastball. Cubs do really well with those. And he just fits the role of something they do well with. And so it's like, I think the steps are there that in 2024, he looks really, really good.
I think my lower ranking of Hodge is a little bit of a Ryan Jensen hangover, where he was added to the 40-man roster. So this time last year, Ryan Jensen, I had Ryan Jensen ranked quite a bit lower. And then he was added to the 40-man roster right before we published our rankings. And I was like, oh shoot, like I didn't think the Cubs believed in him that way. And they added him to the 40-man roster. I was like, well, I guess I got to climb up my ranking. So I jolted him up like several spots, and then it didn't work out. Now the difference is like Porter Hodge is like you said, like the prototype of a player that they like the pitch types and stuff like that the Cubs front office really likes. Jensen wasn't that he was not that way with his pitch types. So that's the big difference, and that's a pretty major difference. But I think it's just like that. It's that Ryan Jensen hangover for me is why I have Hodge still down at 33 and the reliever risk.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the age definitely helps it. The fact that I have a feeling that if Hodge wasn't added to the 40-man, he would be in Boston.
Yep, I agree.
I think that I don't even have to say another team. I think Boston.
Yeah.
So I just feel like if smart people really believe in him, I think that he's worth kind of watching. I'm hedging my bets a little bit at 20. I think that the hype on Porter Hodge may have gotten a little bit too much to start the season. There was, a report out there from somebody that I respect, of course, but got some people fired up. I think when things settle down, I think he's still a really interesting dude.
Yeah. Last guy here. And again, this is one that we don't have a wide range, but I have Josh Rivera ranked at 27. You have him ranked at 21. I know you've liked him back to covering him during the draft. What are your thoughts on Josh Rivera overall?
I've heard some split stuff on him defensively, like, maybe he ends up being more of a third baseman or whatever. Honestly, I just liked what I watched from the draft. Seeing him in person, I thought he was a pro level shortstop. And so, that's kind of the hardest to grade, but boy, I really was just impressed with Josh Rivera. I thought that he showed power. He looked like a defensive option at short, and I'm sure he would be very good at third base. His instincts were really incredible. There's a few plays that I've seen that it's like, holy cow, how did he even think about that on the field at happening all at one time? It is really amazing. So I just think he's a really valuable guy, and I like him. I like him in that 21 spot.
I'll freely admit that I think that of a guy who's made it up as high as he has in the organization, obviously he was just drafted last year, but I've probably seen the least amount of film on him as any other player in this organization, based on the level he's at, which is fine. I still have some homework to do this offseason. I think that with Josh Rivera, when I close my eyes, I just continue to see a guy that is like depth at the AAA level for the Cubs team, and that's valuable. I want to emphasize that that's valuable, but I don't think if that's what I picture for Josh Rivera, I can rank him much higher than 27. But yeah, I think that I'll defer to you on some Josh Rivera stuff, considering we're so close to the draft time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that's a completely realistic outcome for him. And you're right. Like if I knew that he was going to be closer to that, I probably wouldn't rank him that high. I see a guy that's probably not like a full-time major league starter there, but has a pretty long role of that second base, shortstop, third base, 1.5 to 2 wins, just, playing a bunch around the place. And I think that's pretty valuable. So that's kind of where I'm leaning with it. But yeah, if you told me, is Josh Rivera the future third baseman, I'd probably say no. That would be my guess. So.
Yeah. All right, man. Anything else you want to cover as far as our prospect rankings, or anything you want to plug?
No, I mean, not too much. It's going to be draft time coming up here pretty soon. I've been diving into the class a little bit, so look out for some of that. The season kind of really kicks off in February when the college baseball, NCAA college baseball, but junior college starts in kind of mid-January, and so you'll see a little bit more from me on that. So if you're only following me for Cubs prospects, better buckle up, because there's a lot of draft things. You can put me on mute if you need to.
If you're looking for JUCO bandits taking over Greg Zumach's timeline, then it's
amen, brother. Yep, that's going to be happening here pretty soon. I don't really talk too much about the people that are in my own area, so you won't probably see too much in the Nebraska side. But yeah, it should be really fun, and I think I'm just excited for the 2024 season in general of baseball to be back.
Yeah. All right, man. So you can follow this podcast anywhere where you listen to podcasts. You can find us on the Northside Bound YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe over there. Subscribe if you're watching now down below. I've been rolling out some videos. By the time this gets published, just one will have rolled out, the Pete Crow Armstrong prospect profile, which I detailed earlier. I've also got some more scheduled. So I'm going to come out with basically the other guys that I have ranked in the top 11 prospects that are hitters. I'm going to roll out with a Kevin Alcantara one, an Owen Casey profile, Matt Shaw, Jefferson Rojas, James Triantos, Moises Ballesteros. All those guys will be profiled over the Northside Bound YouTube page. Just 12-minute videos, 10 to 12-minute videos. So you guys can go check out kind of detailing those guys. You can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find the podcast on Instagram at Cubs on Deck on Threads. You can find Zumach over at Ivy Futures, all that good stuff. If you guys have any comments or complaints, you can always file them in the YouTube comments. You can also send them over on our Twitter accounts. That's always fun chatting with you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be back in your ears with a player interview in 2 short weeks. Thanks, guys.